Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 6, verse 2. And this regards the Ola offering. Unlike the other offerings in general, the Ola offering is completely burnt. And also, unlike the many of the other offerings, the Ola offering is not necessarily brought for a specific sin. The vast majority of the offerings in these parshios are you committed this sin, you bring this offering, you committed that sin, you bring that offering. There's discussion about it's possible there were certain types of sins that the Ola was brought for, but there's a lot of discussion about what exactly the Ola would be brought for. It could be a person just wanted to express their devotion to God. Chapter 6, verse 2. Tzav Aaron v'esvanav lemor, instruct Aaron and his sons, saying, this is God speaking to Moshe, Zos Toras Ola, this is the law of the Ola offering. Hi ha'ola, it is the Ola al mukdam mizbeach kol halayla boker that would be burnt on the altar through the night. Ve'isham mizbeach tukad bo, and the flame of the altar would be kindled on it. There's a very interesting language in the verse here. It says, this is the law of the Ola. It is the Ola. Of course, it's the Ola. That's what we're talking about. Why does it have to say it is the Ola? It's a very famous idea here that the Kli Yakar mentions. If you look at the Kli Yakar on Pasuk Beis, I think it's the third piece of Kli Yakar, the one beginning with Zos Toras HaOla. This is the law of the Ola offering. Hi Ola al Mukta. Hi Ha'ola miyosel gamri. The phrase "it is the Ola" is totally extraneous. V'skima mefarshim lomar, and the agreement among the commentaries is to say Shabbat lodia, that it's coming to teach Shkol ha'osek b'toras Ola ki'ilu hikriv Ola. Very famous idea. They had a person who studies the laws of the Ola offering. It's as if they brought the Ola offering. This is the concept that if we learn the relevant Torah sources for something that we're not able to do on our own, we get credit as if we did it. V'alze omar zos Toras Ola. That's the meaning of the pasuk. This is the law of the Ola. Ha'osek b'toras ha'ola. If a person deals with the psukim about the Ola, the halachas about the korban Ola, he ha'ola, that is the Ola. Meaning zeu tov k'mo akravas ha'ola atzma v'hi karinan. It's like the person brought the Ola itself. And that's just an interesting idea. This, of course, speaks to the power of Torah study. It speaks to the idea of saying the psukim of korbanos in the morning. Many of us, myself included, are not very particular about doing that, but it is a very significant idea, saying the verses of korbanos, because that follows in the same idea. The best thing would be to do the korban, but we're not able to do the korban today. So to say the verses, it's as if we brought the korban. Very famous idea. Okay, let's jump ahead now, verse 18. And now we go on to probably the most common korban, at least to be brought by an individual, and that is the chatas offering. There are so many cases where a person would have to bring a chatas. A chatas offering is if a person committed a sin b'shogeg, unintentionally. It's not all sins, but specific ones. The most famous examples are Shabbos desecration. So if a person were to desecrate Shabbos unintentionally, let me explain what unintentionally means, by the way. If you had no idea what you physically were doing, we've all probably had the experience of getting worked up about something and waving our hands all over the place, and next thing we know, we flip the light switch off, because we hit something. That's actually not even called doing it unintentionally, because that's technically called misasek, that I'm not even aware of the act that I'm doing. What it means to doing something unintentionally, and this is something that we certainly are frequently guilty of, get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and you turn off the light when you leave the bathroom, or turn on the light, and you know what you're doing, you just forgot that it's Shabbos. So that would be an example of shogeg. You know what you're doing, and you just forgot that it's Shabbos. Or, and this is very relevant, and it's relevant for all of us in one way or another, there are times that we just didn't know something was the halacha. Is it a problem to, select this that way, or do that way, or warm that food that way? So sometimes it's a problem on a rabbinic level. sometimes it's a Torah level problem. It happens. I'm sure we're all guilty of it sometimes. And heaven forbid, we didn't mean to desecrate Shabbos. We just didn't know the rules. That's called desecrating Shabbos b'shogig unintentionally. So that would be one example of that type of scenario. Would be an example of where a person would bring a korban chatas, a sin offering. So the pasuk now says, verse 18, Daber el Aaron v'el b'nav lemor. God tells Moshe, speak to Aaron and his sons. Zos Toras HaChatos. This is the law of the Chatos. Bimkom Asher Tishochet Ha'olah Tishochet HaChatos L'fnei Hashem. On the same spot of the altar that the Olah offering is brought, which is what we were discussing a few moments ago, that's where the Chatos offering is brought as well. Kodesh Kodashim Hi. That offering is considered very sacred. Part of the offering is burnt on the altar, and the rest of the offering is eaten by the Kohen. The owner doesn't eat any of the offering in that case, because of course they shouldn't be eating it. This is a sin offering. They're not supposed to benefit from having sinned, but it gets eaten by the Kohen. Okay, what is the significance of the Chatas and the Olah being slaughtered on the same part of the altar? Why is that significant? Surely the Torah doesn't just mean to say, it's just telling you the spot, and the easiest way to say it is, you remember that spot that we told you about, the Olah, that's the same spot for the Chatas. That's surely not the intent of the Torah. Surely there's some deeper message being conveyed. Kli Yakar on Pasuk Yudches. B'mkom asher tishochet ha'olah tishochet ha'chatas. Hamefarshim amru kidei lechasos ala chotim ki omru she'olah hu makriv. A very, very famous idea. It seems that curiosity is not a new advent in the 21st century. It seems that people have always been curious, and it seems that Jews have always been curious. So, you're there at the Beis HaMikdash, and you see somebody bring an offering. You kind of wonder, I wonder why they're bringing an offering. So if the Chatas was brought on one side of the altar, and the Olah was brought on the other side of the altar, you see where the person's, kind of coming up, or the Kohen is coming up with the person. Oh, I guess that person must have messed up this week. And now, thank God, you have something to talk about at dinner. So that's, we don't want a person to be embarrassed. So the Olah, sort of as we mentioned before, whether it be a person's just inspired in general to bring an Olah offering, or if they were sinful in some way, it was much more subtle. So the many Mefarshim say the Chatas and the Olah are brought in the same spot, so that the casual observer wouldn't have a handle on why this person was bringing an offering. But the Kli Yakar says, V'zet tam chalosh. It's a very weak explanation. The other thing about curiosity is it normally isn't satiated in a few seconds. So if you're curious, so if it's not indicative what side of the altar the animal's being brought up on, you'll just watch another few minutes. If the animal gets fully burnt, then it's that Olah thing. Nothing exciting to talk about. If the animal is not fully burnt, then they messed up. Okay. Could you imagine what the social media would look like in the Beis HaMikdash? A person's like, tweet. Okay. V'od sharei ha'olah zachar v'chatas nekeva. There's another issue, says the Kli Yakar. Animals of different gender are brought for these two different types of offerings. So you don't have to look too hard to figure out what's going on. Some say the Olah is brought for thought, for sinful thoughts. And some say that the Olah is for korbanos that it's just finding favor, without any sin. So if you say that an Olah was also brought for a sinful thought, so it might not be as grave as a Chatas, but it was a sinful thought. So the fact that we're bringing it on the left side is to represent the heart. Ki halev chomed ukleamase gomrin. Alkain shchitas shneim b'tzafon lahoros kilev husal hiteyu umitzafon tipasach hara'ah. So if you say that the ola is brought for sinful thought, so then the idea is it's brought on the side that kind of represents the left side, the heart. And actually, it's a very interesting perspective because it's worthwhile to recognize that sinful thought and sinful action come from the same place, which is my desires. I'm not doing myself a favor if I convince myself either that, well, sinful acts, those are like really where I've let my desires get the best of me, but sinful thoughts, it's not my fault. Or if I say to myself, well, my actions are just my actions, and that's not who I really am. My thoughts are who I am. No, sinful thoughts and sinful acts come from the same source, and that's the relevance, he says, of them being brought on the same part of the altar. And according to the perspective that the ola is brought just as a gift to God, but the Kli Yakar says, if an ola is not for any sin, an ola is just the person is moved and wants to give a gift to God, so then the Kli Yakar says it's very significant also that the chatas goes on the same spot of the altar as the ola to show that even though you've sinned in the chatas situation and you were obligated to bring this korban because of your sin, once you bring the korban, God views you in the same way as the person who brought the korban just out of the goodness of their heart. And that it's a message of forgiveness. So that's either way, the Torah is conveying a very significant perspective with this idea of the chatas and the ola being brought in the same spot. Okay, now we say that the korban chatas is sacred, and anyone who came in contact with the korban chatas has to purify themselves, and anything that the blood of the korban chatas came upon has to be purified afterwards. And verse 21, and an earthenware vessel in which the chatas was cooked, the meat of the chatas was cooked, needs to be broken afterwards. In other words, it can't be that vessel is now used, it can't be that vessel is now used to make my supper. And it actually can't even be used for other offerings for technical reasons that we won't get into now. And if it was made not in an earthenware vessel, but it was made in a brass vessel, then it should be washed with water. This is an interesting idea, and why is the Torah specifically conveying this here? Presumably this is an idea that's relevant for the vessels associated with cooking meat for korbanos in general. Why is it said here? So we'll see a Kli Yakar about this tomorrow, God willing. This morning we discussed the Kli Yakar regarding the lesson of why it says it is the ola. After it was already obvious, we were talking about the ola, and we also spoke about the pasuk that says the ola and the chatas are brought on the same spot of the mizbeach.